The asteroid was silent, floating in deep space like a forgotten rock. No light reached this place except the weak glow of distant stars. The man's ship landed gently on the surface, sending up a cloud of gray dust inside the cockpit. Ethan Carter took a deep breath and stared at the wreck of his old ship. It had been 5 years since he last saw it. 5 years since he left it behind on emergency escape. Now he was back for one small part, a rare energy core he needed to fix his new ship. He thought it would be a quick job. In and out, he was wrong. As he stepped onto the asteroid's surface, his boots crunched on the rocky ground. He walked slowly toward the abandoned ship. Its hull scratched and burned from the past. The ship was called the Orion Star T, and it once carried him across galaxies. Now it looked like a dead body floating in space. The airlock still worked, surprisingly, with a soft hiss. The door opened and he stepped inside. Dust floated in the air like ghost particles. The lights flickered, then turned on, dim and weak. Everything was just like he remembered, and yet different. Ethan moved carefully through the hallway, passing broken consoles and loose wires. The ship creaked and groaned as if it were waking up after a long sleep. He headed toward the engine room, where the parts should be, but something was wrong. He noticed crumbs on the floor, a broken cup near the corner, footprints, small ones. Definitely not his. His heart started to race. He pulled out his scanner and activated motion detection. At first, nothing, then a beep. Movement detected. Cargo bay. Ethan gripped his stun pistol and moved slowly. He didn't want trouble, but he was ready for it. The door to the cargo bay opened with a rusty screech. Inside, something moved quickly behind the stacked crates. He stepped inside, his eyes scanning. Every corner, a flash of movement again, something fast. He raised his pistol. "Who's there?" He called out. No answer. He walked deeper into the bay. Suddenly, he heard breathing, soft, quick, panicked, and then a voice, weak but clear. "Don't come closer." Ethan froze. Behind a crate, a small figure stood up. It was a girl, not human. Her skin was pale blue, almost glowing. Her eyes were large, shining like stars. She wore torn clothes made from strange materials. In her hand, she held a plasma cutter, aimed at him with shaking hands. "Wait," Ethan said, lowering his pistol. "I'm not here to hurt you." "You lie," she said, her voice trembling. "You came to take me." "No," Ethan replied. "I just came for a part from this ship." She stared at him, not believing him. Her hands trembled. But she didn't attack. Ethan took a slow step forward. "What's your name?" he asked gently. She didn't answer. Instead, her eyes darted around, searching for escape. Then she whispered, "You woke it up?" "What do you mean?" Ethan asked, confused. "They know you're here," she said. "They will come." A cold feeling spread through Ethan's chest. "Who will come?" he asked, but the girl stepped back and ran into a dark hallway. Disappearing from view, Ethan stood there, heart pounding. Something was very wrong. He looked around the cargo bay again. There were signs of living blankets, empty food packs. A small light unit. She had been living here, maybe for weeks, maybe months. But why here, on his ship? And what did she mean by they? He didn't believe in ghosts or monsters, but the way she looked terrified was real. He tapped his communicator. "Base. I may need more time," he said, but the signal was filled with static. No connection. Suddenly, the lights flickered. Again, the ship made a low, groaning sound, like metal twisting in the dark. Ethan turned around, aiming his pistol again. He thought he saw eyes in the shadows. Watching him, his ship was supposed to be empty, but it wasn't, and now seemed like something else was coming too. He whispered to himself. This was supposed to be simple. But nothing about this place felt simple anymore. Behind him, somewhere deep in the ship, he heard a soft whisper. Not words, just a sound, cold and strange. The girl's voice echoed in his head. They will come, and for the first time in years. Ethan felt afraid. Ethan stood frozen, his breath fogging. The cold air as silence wrapped around him like a blanket. He wanted to believe the strange alien girl had simply panicked, that she was just hiding, afraid. But something in her voice kept repeating in his mind, they will come. He moved slowly now. Back through the dim corridors of the Orion star, every flicker of light made him flinch. Every sound felt louder than it should be. Behind every corner, he expected to see her again. But she had vanished deeper into the ship. He returned to the engine room, trying to refocus. He came for the energy core. Just that. He could grab it and leave. No need to get involved, but his hands hesitated as he reached for the panel. Something inside him didn't feel right. Then he heard it, again breathing. Not his own, close, soft, frightened. He turned and saw her standing in the doorway, the plasma cutter now lowered. Her eyes didn't glow in anger now. They glowed with fear. Not of him, but of something else. You shouldn't be here. She said quietly. They feel movement. They hear machines wake up. Ethan took a careful step forward. I don't understand, he said. Who are they? She looked down, her fingers nervously pulling at the edge of her worn sleeves. Hunters, she said. Metal ones. They take broken things, and people too. Ethan frowned. Why this ship? He asked, why live here? She hesitated, then pointed to a cracked window above. Through it, a faint blue planet hung in the distance. This ship was quiet, she said. Forgotten, safe, until now. Ethan realized she had been hiding. Here for a long time, alone, surviving on whatever she could find. He felt a strange mix of guilt and curiosity. What's your name? He asked. She blinked slowly. I don't have one. Everyone has a name, he said. Offering a small smile, even stowaways, she didn't smile back. You woke the ship, she repeated. The systems, the signals, they hear everything. He looked at the console, noticed a faint red light blinking that wasn't blinking before. His motion through the ship had triggered internal systems, even passive ones, navigation pings, heat sensors, broadcast pulses. He cursed under his breath. All right, he said. Listen. I just need one part and then I'll go. I didn't mean to disturb you. You can't go, she said quickly. They saw the pulse. They will follow it. Ethan checked his wrist scanner again. A soft tone beeped. Something was coming. A small ship, fast and quiet, closing in from the far edge of the asteroid field. It wasn't broadcasting any ID. He looked back at her. We have to move. She stepped back, fear rising in her eyes again. No, she said. They want me. They always want me. Then we don't let them take you, he said, voice firm now. We fight back. Her lips trembled. You'll die, maybe. He replied, but I don't leave people behind. She hesitated, looked at him like she had never seen anything like him before. Then she gave the smallest nod. Ethan pulled open the engine panel and yanked the energy core loose, sparks dancing. From the cables, he handed her a small tool. You ever used one of these? He asked. She took it, and for the first time, her hands stopped shaking. Yes, she said. But I've only used it to survive. Then this time, Ethan said, use it to win. The floor beneath them gave a soft vibration, the incoming ship was landing. A low metallic hum started to fill the corridor like the breathing of a machine waking from sleep. Ethan looked at her, then at the hallway beyond. You've got 5 minutes, he said. Then the hunters arrive. She looked at him, her fear still there. But something else had joined it now. Something stronger. Trust. And somewhere behind the walls of steel and wire, something else moved, slow and cold. A sound like metal claws scraping against the hull echoed faintly through the vents. They were not alone anymore. Ethan clenched his jaw. "Next time I come for a spare part," he muttered, "remind me to check for tenants." She didn't understand the joke, but she followed him anyway. Steps silent, breath steady. The fight hadn't started yet, but the war had already found them, and neither of them would ever be the same again. The ship had landed, not far from the Orion star. Its engines made no sound, but its presence was heavy, like a cold breath hanging in the dark. Ethan and the alien girl crouched near a service tunnel behind the engine room. The scanner on his wrist showed 3 life forms, no heat, no heartbeat, just movement. "They're not alive," the girl whispered. "They're machines, copies of soldiers. They hunt with orders. No mercy, no talk." Ethan narrowed his eyes. "Why are they?" "After you?" "I escaped," she said, her voice dry. "I was not meant to. I was part of something they built, something they feared." Her hands shook again, but her eyes were clear. Ethan realized then she wasn't just hiding, she was running from something that should not exist. Outside, the sound of metal footsteps echoed through the corridor. Slow and steady, a sensor beeped near the door, and the internal lights dimmed for a moment. "They're scanning for power traces," Ethan whispered. "We can't stay here." He took a breath, then opened the maintenance hatch. He motioned for her to go first. She hesitated, then slipped into the narrow crawl space. Ethan followed and closed it behind them. The air inside was stale and tight. Pipes hissed, and the metal groaned around them. They crawled silently. The only sound their breathing and the distant clang of boots on the deck. The girl tapped him on the shoulder, pointed to a vent. "Observation room," she whispered. Ethan peeked through the grate below. The boarding party had entered. 3 tall, skeletal machines in black armor scanned the room. They didn't speak, didn't look around like humans would. Instead, their heads moved with precise clicks, as if they already knew where to look. One of them stopped and turned slowly toward the wall. Toward the crawl space. Ethan froze, then, with sudden force, the machine raised its arm and fired a bolt of energy at the panel. The impact made the whole wall shake. Sparks flew. "They know," the girl whispered. Eyes wide. "They always know. We need to split up," Ethan said quickly. "They're tracking you, not me." She grabbed his arm. "They'll kill you." "I've fought worse," he lied. "Find the old drop bay. There's a launch pod there. It might still work. I'll distract them." He turned and backed down the tunnel. Heart pounding, the girl didn't argue. She vanished into the shadows of the other path. Ethan exited into the medbay and ran straight across the corridor, letting his footsteps echo loudly. A moment later, the machines turned sharply and followed the sound in the dark, quiet places of the ship. The girl moved like light, fast and quiet. She reached the drop bay, found the control panel dead. But she wasn't helpless. Her fingers worked over the wires, remembering things she had seen, things they once forced her to learn, back near the reactor. Ethan ducked into the power chamber and triggered a short EMP burst. It knocked out lights. For 5 seconds, just enough, he slipped into a shaft and climbed toward the command deck. But he didn't notice the small red dot on his shoulder. A marker from the hunter's vision. One of the machines split from the others and followed silently. It didn't need sound or orders. It had a single goal: to remain and recover the escape subject. Ethan found an old turret control, powered it manually, and aimed it at the hallway. As the first machine walked into range, he fired. The blast hit it straight in the chest, throwing it against the wall. For a second, he smiled. Then the second one came, faster. It jumped over the broken unit and fired. The wall near Ethan exploded, throwing him across the room. He groaned, his side burning, his visor cracked. But before the machine could finish the job, a sudden blast hit it from behind. The girl stood in the doorway, plasma cutter glowing. "You said you'd distract them," she said. "You didn't say you'd die." Ethan laughed, even through the pain. Nice timing, she helped him up, and together they ran back to Ward. The launch bay, the third machine, was close now, but something had changed. It didn't attack right away. Instead, it paused. Then opened a projection displaying her image, a code, and one word. Asset. The girl stared at the screen, her hands trembling again. "That's not me," she whispered. "Not anymore, Ethan." Fired the turret again, this time disabling the final machine's arm. Oh, yes. It sparked and dropped. The girl moved fast. Slamming the override button on the pod bay, the door hissed open. "Get in," she shouted. "What about you?" Ethan asked. "I'll follow," she said, but her voice wavered. "I'm not leaving without you," he said, grabbing her arm in the distance. More signatures were approaching. Back up. More hunters. More machines. The girl looked at the stars beyond. The open pod hatch, then back at Ethan. "They'll never stop," she said. "Unless we stop them first," and somewhere in the dark corridors of the ship, a new signal woke up Holder. Deeper. Not just a machine, but something far worse. Something that had built the hunters, and now it wanted her back. Alive or broken. The ship was bleeding. Not in the way a living creature bleeds, but in the way a machine dies. Sparks burst from cracked panels. Broken wires hung like vines, and somewhere deep inside, something ancient had begun to stir. Ethan gripped the railing as he and the girl ran down the narrow corridor. The sounds of metal feet echoing behind them. She moved fast, but not without fear. Her steps were silent, but her eyes betrayed what she felt. She knew this wasn't over. "They're not just machines," she whispered between breaths. "They're scouts." "Scouts for who?" Ethan asked, even though he already felt the answer inside him. She looked at him, her face pale. "For the hive." A chill passed through him like ice through wires. He had heard the name once before in old war reports, something humans barely survived, something they never fully understood. The hive wasn't a place or a species, it was a system, a thinking swarm that could steal, learn, evolve. They reached the auxiliary command bay, and the doors hissed shut behind them for a moment. There was silence, just the thrum of the failing ship. Ethan touched his ribs, flinching, the wound from the earlier blast still fresh. The girl knelt beside him, opened a medkit, and began patching him up with careful hands. She was gentle, but fast, like she'd done it 100 times before. "You were built by them?" he asked, voice low. "No," she replied, taping a wound. "I was made for them." But something inside me broke free before they could finish it. Before I became like them. He looked at her not with suspicion, but with something else. Strange feeling he hadn't allowed in years. Trust. She stood and pulled up a screen from a cracked console. "This ship has enough power left to trigger a defense field," she said, "but we'll have to activate it manually, in the core chamber." Ethan already knew what that meant. The core chamber was 3 decks below, and right now the hive was coming straight for it. It's probably to feed, or worse, to absorb the ship's brain and memory. "If they reach the core," she said, "they'll learn everything you know. All your maps, your people, your weapons." Ethan wiped blood from his mouth and nodded. "Then let's stop them." Before they could move, the lights blinked again. This time, they didn't come back. Only emergency red lights remained, and in that glow, a faint sound rose like claws tapping on metal. "Hundreds of them. They've breached the hull." The girl said, eyes wide, "They're inside. They didn't run now. They moved with purpose." Ethan grabbed a pulse rifle from the locker, handed her a shock rod. It buzzed to life in her hand like it knew her. Like it was afraid to disobey, they dropped through the access shaft 1 floor at a time, shadows moving past the grates. Beside them, silent watchers in the dark. At one point, Ethan looked through the metal bars and saw a machine crawling across the ceiling like an insect, scanning with red eyes. It didn't see them, but it would soon. The girl stopped, her hand pressed to the floor. She closed her eyes, then whispered, "They're changing tactics. They know we're near the core." "How?" Ethan asked. "They can feel energy patterns, heartbeat pressure, motion waves," she said. "It's what they're designed for." They reached the final hatch. And as it opened, a wall of heat hit them. The core chamber glowed blue and gold. Alive with unstable power, panels sparked as the AI tried to protect itself from digital invasion. "They're already in the system," Ethan muttered. "We're late, not too late," she said. Stepping into the chamber as they entered, 3 hunter drones dropped from the ceiling like spiders, without sound, without warning. The first one lunged at Ethan, who rolled and fired his rifle, the pulse tearing through its chest. But the others were fast. One of them tackled the girl, pinning her to the floor. Its arm formed a needle. Aiming for her neck, it didn't want to kill her. It wanted to bring her back live, silent, obedient. But she wasn't that girl anymore. She screamed not in fear, but with fury. Her hands lit with crackling light, and she drove the shock rod through the machine's eye. The surge fried its circuits, and it collapsed beside her, twitching. Ethan blasted the third one, just as it leaped toward them. It exploded mid-air. Raining pieces of steel across the room, the silence that followed was short-lived. The core itself began to pulse faster, reacting to the fight, or maybe to something deeper. A voice echoed through the chamber, not from speakers, but inside. "Their minds return the asset," it said, "or be consumed." Ethan looked at her, blood dripping from her chin, eyes fierce. "You hearing that too?" She nodded slowly. "That's not a machine," she said. "That's the hive, and now it knows your name too." Ethan didn't answer. He turned to the control panel, fingers moving fast, unlocking the core override. Lights flickered, warning tones screamed, and the countdown began. 15 minutes until overload. A last option, but their only one. She stepped beside him, watching the blue light dance across his face. "You don't have to do this," she said. "Yes, I do," he replied, but not alone. Above them, the hull shook. Something massive had arrived, something worse than scouts. Worse than hunters, the hive had come in person. The last stand was about to begin. The air inside the core chamber was thick with tension. Ethan's hands moved swiftly over the control panel, his mind racing against the countdown. Beside him, the alien girl watched, eyes sharp but filled with a quiet sadness. "I have to tell you everything," she said suddenly, voice low. Ethan paused, looked at her, nodding. She took a deep breath. "I was not born free. I was made an experiment from a distant military ship. They used my DNA to create weapons, soldiers without heart or will. I escaped because something inside me fought back, but they have hunted me ever since." Ethan clenched his fists, anger burning in his chest. "We're the same," he said, "both made to fight. Both trying to survive," she nodded. "But they are human contractors, not aliens. They want to capture me to control their weapons, to build more like me. They don't care about me as a person." Ethan felt a deep betrayal, not just for her, but for all humanity. He looked out the window and saw the massive ship looming outside. Its dark hull blocked out the stars, like a shadow waiting to fall. "They won't stop," she said. "Not until I'm back on their ship or destroyed." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Then we won't let them." He pushed a button and the cores. Defenses began to power up slowly, but the countdown kept ticking, reminding them time was short. She moved closer and whispered, "If we fail, you have to escape. Don't risk your life for me." He shook his head. "I'm not leaving without you." Her eyes softened for a moment, then hardened again. "You don't understand. I'm more than what they made me, but I'm also their target. If I survive, they will never stop hunting. The ship trembled. Beneath them, a low rumble that shook dust from the ceiling. Outside, alarms screamed. And the sound of heavy footsteps grew louder. "They're boarding," Ethan said, raising his pulse rifle. She readied her plasma cutter. Hands steady now, together. They prepared to fight the coming storm. Suddenly, the hatch burst open, and a group of soldiers poured in, clad in dark armor, faces hidden behind helmets. Their weapons raised, but they hesitated, frozen by the strange sight of Ethan and the alien girl standing side by side. The leader stepped forward, voice cold and metallic. "Return the asset," he ordered. Ethan stood firm. "She's not your asset. She's a person." A tense silence filled the room, broken only by the ticking countdown. The girl raised her cutter. Sparks flying. "We fight," she said, fierce and unyielding. The soldiers attacked, but Ethan and the girl moved as one. He fired bursts of energy while she sliced through the enemy lines. Each moment was a battle for survival, a dance of light and shadow. One soldier lunged at Ethan from behind, but the girl saw it and struck him down. The fight raged on, but slowly the tide turned. The soldiers fell back, retreating as the core defenses powered up. Breathing hard, Ethan looked at the girl. "We did it," he said. She shook her head. "Not yet. The hive will come. Stronger and closer." He nodded. "Then we prepare. Together." They turned to the control panel, ready for the next challenge. In the heart of the abandoned ship, two unlikely allies stood against a dark future, and their fight had only just begun. The ship hummed quietly under their feet, like a tired giant waking slowly. Ethan and the alien girl moved through the dim corridors, their steps echoing softly. The glow from the core room faded behind them. But the danger was far from over. They reached the control room, dust thick in the air, broken screens flickering. Weakly, but here, they found tools, old maps, energy cells, and weapons left behind from a forgotten war. The girl knelt down, her fingers tracing the edges of the panels, as if remembering something long lost. "We need to fix the ship," Ethan said. "Not just for us, but to keep the hive out." She nodded. "I can help you. But this ship is old, and the systems are fragile." Together, they worked side by side, Ethan rewiring circuits while she rebooted alien tech with surprising skill. The old ship began to hum louder, systems waking from their long sleep. As they worked, they talked quietly, sharing pieces of their pasts. Ethan told her about the stars he'd traveled, the places he'd seen. The girl spoke in broken sentences about her escape, her fears, and the strange hope she held inside. "It's strange," Ethan said, smiling faintly, "how we come from different worlds, but find trust here." She smiled back, a rare light in her eyes. "Maybe we are not so different." The ship groaned suddenly, and alarms blared the hives. Signal was close, their enemies arriving faster than expected. "We don't have much time," Ethan said, grabbing a plasma rifle, "but we can make a stand." She pulled out a small device from her pocket. "This will help, but it's dangerous." Ethan took it, watching her carefully. "I trust you," he said simply. They set traps through the corridors, mixing human and alien tech, creating a maze for their enemies. The girl showed Ethan how to move silently, how to watch for signals invisible to the eye when the ship's doors finally opened. Ethan and the girl were ready. Together, they faced the storm, not just as fighter and refugee, but as partners bound by hope and determination. Outside, the stars watched silently. As the battle for the abandoned ship began anew, the silence before the storm was heavy, as if the ship itself held its breath. Ethan and the alien girl stood side by side, watching the dark shapes approach through the viewport. Their hearts pounded with a mix of fear and resolve. The enemy was not just hunters or machines anymore. It was something larger, a shadow that stretched across the stars, hungry and relentless, as the boarding ramps lowered. They stepped forward, weapons ready, every moment stretched like time itself slowed. The first wave of enemies poured into the corridor, cold and merciless. Ethan fired his rifle, bright pulses lighting the dark. The girl moved with strange grace, her plasma cutter slicing through metal and wire. They fought not just for their lives, but for something greater, a chance to be free. The battle was fierce, the ship shaking. With each explosion, but even as they fought, Ethan could see the fatigue in her eyes. The mark from the hunters glowed faintly on her arm, a reminder of the price she paid when the enemy closed in. She made a sudden decision. "Go," she shouted, pushing Ethan toward the escape pod. "I'll hold them off." "No," Ethan said, grabbing her arm. "We face this together." She shook her head, tears shining in her eyes. "If we fail, you must live," with a fierce cry. She charged back into the fray, electricity crackling around her hands. Ethan followed, firing beside her. They fought like they had nothing to lose, but everything to protect. Suddenly, the ship trembled violently. A core overload was beginning. The defense system reacting to their fight. The countdown echoed in their minds, reminding them time was running out. The girl drove a final surge of energy into the enemy, stunning them long enough for Ethan to reach the core controls with trembling hands. He triggered the self-destruct sequence. "Now?" he yelled, and the girl grabbed his arm, pulling him toward the escape pod. They dove inside just as the ship exploded behind them, a brilliant light filling the void. Breathless, they looked at each other. Bruised but alive, the girl smiled weakly. "We survived," Ethan nodded. "Together." As they drifted away from the wreckage, stars shining around them like distant promises, Ethan knew their fight was far from over. But for now, they had each other, and that was enough. The galaxy was vast and dangerous, but sometimes, even in the darkest corners, hope could be found in the most unexpected places, and their story was only just beginning.